But I think it's really, at least faster, because they're all going to be squirted in. It's very similar to what else. We just turn them on. Hello. We try one deck out there. Yeah, I even have them do layers. Hello. Oh, there we go. Yes, sir. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Kickoff forums. So our intention behind these are kind of to provide the public with an educational opportunity to learn about a comprehensive plan, what it entails, and how you can get involved in this process. And my name is Michael Weir. I'm one of the county planners, and behind me are my colleagues who are also planners at the county. So on today's agenda, we're going to go over a kind of, what does Spokane look like, go over a little profile. What is a comprehensive plan? What governs the process of a comprehensive plan? How you can get involved in this comprehensive plan. We're going to go over elements and chapters, as well as how you can learn more about this whole process. So a little bit more on that profile. The county is right around 1,700 square miles. There's a total of 13 incorporated cities and towns and 33 different unincorporated urban growth areas. Over the next 20 years, we're looking at, 26 years, we're looking at a growth of right around 103,000 people, so pretty substantial growth. So our current data right now, we're looking at right around 231,000 housing units and a median home price of 440,000. And rent is right around $100 or $1,200. In 2022, the median household income was right around 70,000, and there was nearly 14,000 employer establishments. So what is a comprehensive plan? Comprehensive plan looks at goals and policies and objectives that really lead the growth of the county. It's going to look at the population we have incoming over the next 20 years and articulate how we designate that growth and where we want it to occur and how we'll meet those expectations. It's important to remember that a comprehensive plan is not legislation. It's more of a document that's meant to guide legislation. So our elected officials will look at this comprehensive plan and use that in reference to the decision-making process. So a little bit more about what governs the comprehensive plan. So we refer to it as the Growth Management Act. You might hear us say GMA. And it was really intended to look at potential growth that's happening over the next 20-year period and see what needs to be developed and occur in order to adapt for that growth. So we're looking at capital facilities, land use, all those good things. It is important to remember that this is required. It is state mandated. And for the unincorporated, oh, did I go muted? That's all right. I can talk. So over the next, we're looking at June 30th, 2026 is our required update time period. So you'll see we have quite a few different timelines across the state. For Spokane County specifically, we're looking at 2026. And a lot of those jurisdictions around us right around that 2027 deadline. And the whole point of GMA was really to look at that growth and ensure that we're meeting it through adequate facilities and other provisions. So GMA establishes 15 different goals for meeting this growth. Some of those being urban growth, housing, transportation, property rights, permits, your natural environment, open space and recreation, climate change and resiliency, which is a new one, historic preservation, one of my personal favorites. And as we go through our presentation, you'll see that kind of the little emblem up there, and those kind of relate back to these goals. So as we go over individual elements, you'll see how, as we develop these chapters, they relate to these GMA planning goals. So we refer to them a lot as elements, as that's kind of how they're written down in the RCW, but you might better know them as chapters. So a few of those are land use, housing, rural transportation, climate change and resiliency, capital facilities and utilities, economic development, parks and recreation, those last two being optional, but they are included in our county comprehensive plan. And then those additional chapters would be natural environment, natural resources, sub-area planning, and cultural resources. So it can get kind of complicated seeing, how is this comprehensive plan implemented? Because there's a lot of moving parts. So Growth Management Act, that's that state mandated portion of it. That countywide planning policies is all of the jurisdictions coming together and cooperating on making these planning policies that we all implement. The public participation and community vision is kind of what we're doing here, where we try to get that input of the community to be implemented in this plan. So all that put together kind of creates that comprehensive plan. And on our day-to-day operation of implementing it, we have those capital budget decisions. So it'll really, it advises your decision makers on how they're going to invest in certain capital facilities to meet that growth. Other planning activities include annexation, tax policies, interlocal agreements between other jurisdictions. Kind of more on our day-to-day operation of what we do in our planning office would be permits, zoning, subdivision, building requirements. And all the other departments as well, when they make their planning documents, they refer to this comprehensive plan, and it really guides how they make their internal department plans as well. And I'm going to pass it over to Josh, who is our lead on public participation, and he'll talk a little bit about how you can get involved.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that wonderful introduction to comprehensive planning. So why does this plan matter to you? Well, over the next 2 years will be your opportunity to tell us your different visions and your values so that we can actually put that into policies. And what's so important about these policies? These policies will help guide land use decisions. Not only will it guide land use decisions and get things built in the natural and built environment, but it's also going to affect our elected officials' decisions. When elected officials and our local governments are making different policy decisions, these will be they will base these off of these policies that are in the comprehensive plan. So getting your vision and your values during this early period is invaluable to making sure that your voice will be heard. And we would love to get this early and continuous, and this early involvement is really what's going to make sure that your voice and your vision is put inside of here. And what we also need to realize is that this just doesn't affect us. It affects future generations down the road in Spokane County. And I think it'd also be important to note that this isn't really our comprehensive plan. It's the public's comprehensive plan. And these are just going to be great opportunities for us to work together on this, just to make sure that your voices are being heard. Because the best comprehensive plans aren't done in a vacuum. They're not done in an office. They're not being done with us just working on our computers. It's us getting out to the public, getting your feedback, and making sure that your ideas are being implemented. The cool thing is, not only is public participation important, it's also required. Under the Washington State Growth Management Act, they require early and continuous public participation. So we need public participation starting not just now, but throughout the whole next 2-year process. And that's one of the reasons we're having this. We want to get you informed on what's going on early in the process so you can make the best decisions for your community. One of the ways in which we've helped implement this is that we created a public participation program. This public participation program helps create the framework and a roadmap for how you can be involved in this process. It creates different innovative techniques and different communication strategies and provides a timeline for public participation. This was recently recommended from our planning commission and will be going before the Board of County Commissioners on June 11th. It's on our website for your view and for any comments. So what's one of the best ways in which you can be involved right now? I recommend that you go on our website and send us an email to join our stakeholder list. Stakeholders represent different groups and can help show your vision and your values and collaborate with county staff on these important policy and decision-making opportunities. And we're also having different public forums. So as Michael said earlier, a comprehensive plan is filled with different elements and different chapters. And for each of those, we're going to have different public forums. This will be an opportunity for staff to share drafts, ideas, and collaborate with the public. You can show us your opinions based off our drafts and ideas, and we can really make sure that we are getting that early public participation and that early comment to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the community. Another way in which we welcome you is to join our email sign up on our website. You can enter your email and we'll give you the latest news on Spokane County comprehensive planning, as well as different schedules and different dates for public forums. And throughout this update, we tend to view our website as really the hub of comprehensive planning. That's where we're going to keep our documents, our drafts. It's where you can submit public comment, see different schedules, and really just get all the most up-to-date information that you will need to create informed decisions. Lastly, if you'd like a more personal meeting with us, you can schedule a community consultation. If you can get a few groups together, we'll make sure that we can meet and we can answer any questions that you may have regarding comprehensive planning for the 2026 periodic update. And lastly, we are also making sure to do a great social media campaign. We'll be using the county social media just to help give you guys information on when public forums and different meetings are taking place again, so you can have the most up-to-date information to make informed decisions. And next, we're going to get into the different element and chapter proponents. And I'm going to pass this off to Tate Andre to go over the land use and housing elements. Thank you so much.
Excuse me, are you taking questions during your presentation?
We would like to keep them to the end, especially with a crowd of this size. But we will answer your questions at the end, and we'll have a significant amount of time for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm still getting over my nerves for these sort of things, so bear with me. But I'm going to be talking about a couple elements today. The first one being land use. This one's a bit unique compared to the other ones, as the other elements usually have about 1 to 3 of us project managing them. This one we're all on. And that's mostly because land use sort of touches everything. The basic way to describe land use is how we're deciding where things go for both practicality and for what I call livability. So practically, we have to decide where do land uses make the most sense geographically. Looking at the topography and the natural characteristics, if there's a environmental resource that provides ecological or aesthetic value, or also an issue that might pose safety to the threat to the safety, given a topographic slope and such. We also look at, can the infrastructure serve the area either currently or in the future efficiently? And we also need to make sure there isn't any conflicts between the land uses. The classic example being, we don't want to put a factory next to a house. But we also look at livability. Are the places that we're planning for, do they promote social gathering? Do they give us good access to work and play and to the natural amenities around us? And it also affects the character of a built environment, such as the architectural character, or the urban form or fabric. And so land use sort of touches every GMA planning goal, but the direct ones here are urban growth and reducing sprawl. Like I said, we have to plan our land uses in a way that public facilities can adequately serve them or can be provided later in an efficient manner. But good land use policy is also extremely important for reducing that very low density sprawling development. This is just a breakdown of the basic categories we have for land uses, and each of these have various intensities. So for residential, we have low, medium, and high density uses. Commercial, we have regional, community, and neighborhood. Industrial, we have light and heavy. And we also have mixed uses, which is, as it describes, it provides for multiple uses within one area. And these usually emphasize pedestrian orientation, aesthetics, and design. We also have resource lands, which is something unique to the county. All our resource lands, those being agricultural, forest, and mineral lands, exist outside of our urban growth areas in our jurisdiction. So that is something unique that we plan for. And so this is important because land use is arguably the most important tool we have as planners. It is used to accomplish essentially every goal and policy and vision for every element. You can't plan for environmental protections. You can't plan to get all the housing that we need. We can't facilitate economic growth without good land use planning. The next one I'm going to talk about is housing. And this is something myself and my colleague Bongo Thompson are on. Bongo unfortunately can't be here today, but I don't think I'll have any issues explaining what's all going on in this element. So the main purpose of this element is to make sure everybody has access to quality, safe, and affordable housing. And this affects many things. It's going to affect the supply of housing we have, the housing types and densities we have, and the proximity of those different housing types to all the amenities. And this hits similar planning goals. Reducing sprawl is a big one. You can't reduce that development of sprawl if we only plan for one housing type. It's important to plan for all types of housing types and different standards of living and different lifestyles. Obviously, we intend to meet the housing GMA planning goal and the housing element, but also historic preservation. Spokane County has a lot of history reflected in its architecture and areas, and so identifying and encouraging the preservation of historic housing stock is also very important. This time around, the housing element's going to be the most robust it's ever been, and that's mostly due to new state requirements that aren't honestly unique to just Washington state. They're more reflective of pretty progressive planning policies that or planning practices nationwide. But the way the state does this is through a couple new things. One of those is having land capacity for various housing needs, and they break this up by economic segments of the population. So we're looking at people that make 0 to 30% of the area median income, 30 to 50%, 50 to 80, and so on. And we also need to plan for land to contain emergency housing, shelters, and supportive housing. We also need to have programs and action plans to achieve our housing needs. We have to begin identifying any racist and exclusionary policies in Spokane County's history and begin to mitigate and undo those. And then we also have to start providing for moderate density housing options in our urban areas. And that's not a blanket all across the board. There's a lot of planning going on and where those different housing density types should be located, especially when we're thinking about infrastructure availability. And so to conclude this is informed by a lot of things. The biggest one being that population projection. We're getting 100,000 new people in the next 20 years. We need to figure out a way to house all of them and make sure we can allow for enough housing to be developed. We're also doing a land capacity analysis. So we're looking at how much land capacity we have for housing. And as we plan for growth in our urban growth areas, we need to see how well we can account for that growth within that area and, if we need to expand it or move it into areas that make more sense for growth, that is a big part of the housing goal. There's a lot of interagency coordination. Right when we got hired, we started working with our housing and community development department at the county, making sure our plans are coordinated, but we've also begun a lot of outreach with other authorities in Spokane, such as Spokane Housing Authority, community frameworks. But we have like 600 stakeholder lists. Not all of those are housing related, but we have a lot of people interested in this topic and are experts in this topic that are going to help work through this plan with us. And lastly, we do a lot of our internal data analyses. This is not an exhaustive list of everything we do, but we are obviously looking at housing costs, both in terms of for buying and for renting. We're looking at how many people own versus rent in the county, and also looking at, how much are people making? What can the average person, either one person, two-person households actually afford in Spokane County compared to what the actual market is? So that's all I have for you. I'm going to hand it back to Josh, and he's going to talk about transportation.
Thank you so much, Dave, for that wonderful discussion on our housing needs in Spokane County. And right now, I'm going to go over the transportation element. Transportation element is being done by myself, Bongo Thompson, as well as Spokane County's Public Works Department. So what is the main purpose of the transportation element? The main purpose of the transportation element is to ensure that Spokane County's transportation network has the financing and the infrastructure to meet our next 20-year population growth, while also being consistent with the land use element. This really provides a 20-year vision / framework for the transportation network, ensuring that we have the right infrastructure and infrastructure projects and financing to meet that 20-year growth period and that 20-year land use map. And again, I think it's so important to note that the transportation element and the land use element are connected. You have to be able to prove that your transportation network can meet the needs of your updated land use map and that population without compromising your level of service standards. Now, transportation meets 3 specific GMA goals. The first one is to ensure that we can serve our urban growth areas. Again, making sure that our transportation network can serve those areas without compromising level of service standards. Now, the second one is actually quite interesting and has actually been updated based off of House Bill 1181. That's the new climate House bill. Well, the first thing is that we should encourage efficient multimodal transportation. That includes different buses, active transportation, which includes bicycling and walking, but also multi-connected trails. But also we need to look into reducing vehicle miles traveled and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And that's done at a regional level, and it's collaborated through different cities because obviously transportation doesn't follow jurisdictional boundaries. And that would be done by Spokane County's local NPO, SRTC, the Spokane Regional Transportation Council. And lastly, it's our goal and actually our duty to make sure that when projects and when development is done, we have the transportation networks to serve it. That is essentially when, when occupancy is there and when projects are being built, we can prove that our road networks can support that growth without compromising those level of service standards. Now, how does this actually work out? Well, right here, we have our comprehensive plan. And again, those policies are met by your vision and your values. And then that meets into the capital facilities plan. Now, the capital facilities plan sets those level of service standards. It shows different financing needs of the county, but also shows the different capacity of infrastructure and the condition of it and where it's located. And that really falls into the transportation element, which shows those different financing options as well as different infrastructure options. And that's actually brought into and implemented by the 6-year transportation improvement plan, which shows 6 years of infrastructure and financing plans. And then that goes more in detail with a 20-year plan. And what does that really create? That ensures that we are having infrastructures that are financed and built without compromising our level of service standards. Next, I'd like to get into the natural environment. The natural environment is being done by myself and my fellow colleague, Tate Andre. Now, the natural environment consists of natural resource lands, critical areas, and open space. Now, one of the main goals is to protect those natural resource lands. In Spokane County, we have in a very unique geographical place. We have great natural resource lands, which serve as a great economic, but also as a great cultural resource. And it's our obligation as planners to make sure that we conserve those in a sustainable way, that we're protecting them for current and future generations. We also have our open space and recreation. That's ensuring that we are protecting our wildlife and also our fish, and that's done by preserving open space, creating those wildlife corridors, but also developing parklands and recreational opportunities for the public as well. And then also we have the environment. That is ensuring that in Spokane County, we have clean air and clean water. So what do natural resource lands really include? Well, it includes our agricultural lands, our forestry lands, and our mineral lands. These are of great economic and cultural importance to Spokane County. And I think it's so important to note that once you lose those lands, they're really gone. Once they're developed, there's no getting them back. So this is such an important opportunity to really make sure over the next 2 years that we get this right. And that we really make sure that we are protecting, our natural environment and our natural resource lands to the best ways possible, because there's no getting those lands back once they're developed. Next, we're getting into critical areas. This includes our wetlands, our critical aquifer recharge areas, hazardous areas, geologically hazardous areas, frequently flooded areas. And this is really to ensure that we're protecting those areas which have important ecological functions to the environment. But also it helps protect property owners as well. It prevents them from building in areas which may have steep slopes, or protects them from geological hazard areas or frequently flooded areas. And a lot of this is implemented into our critical areas ordinance, which helps set performance standards to help protect these areas. We are required under the GMA to update our critical areas ordinance 1 year after the completion date of the comprehensive plan. Next, I'd like to get into open space. And again, as I said earlier, this is really creates different open space and wildlife corridors to help protect critical species and different wildlife that is really unique to Spokane County. This also helps create different interconnected trails, which are important and a fun recreational opportunity for the county as well. Next, I'd like to get into the rural lands element that is being done by myself and Tate Andre as well. The GMA describes rural lands as lands that are not in the urban growth areas, but also not designated for natural resource lands as well. And what's so important about these is it's really informed by rural values, rural vision, rural character. We understand that our lifestyles in rural lands look a little bit different than they do in our urban lands. We have lower densities, larger lot sizes. But also rural lands are a great way to help protect our natural environment as well. The natural environment and the rural lands are really connected, and we can use our rural lands as a way to protect that natural environment. Even within our current zoning code, we have different innovative techniques to do that. We have rural clustering development and also a rural conservation zoning. So these two elements really go hand in hand with protecting each other. Again, this meets several GMA planning goals. It helps ensure that urban growth is done in urban areas. We have the rural and urban growth split, which also helps reduce the inappropriate conversion of sprawl. And again, while also protecting that natural environment. And again, as I said earlier, the main purpose of the rural lands is to preserve those rural lifestyles, reduce the inappropriate conversion of sprawl, while also protecting the natural environment, but also creating rural economies and rural businesses as well. And now I'd like to bring it off to Michael Ware, who would give you a quick introduction into capital facilities planning. Thank you.
Hello, everyone again. So I'm going to go over capital facilities and kind of how they play a role in growth management and our comprehensive plan. So what are capital facilities? Well, they really are our built environment. They're all around us. We interact with them on our daily basis. They include facilities and services. So a little bit about those. We got domestic water, stormwater, sewer, schools, roads, parks, government facilities. And it's important to note that these can be not only owned by a jurisdiction, but they can also be owned by special districts as well as private parties. So a little bit about the GMA goals for capital facilities. The first one's really about encouraging that growth where the facilities already exist, because that's going to be the most efficient way that we can, coordinate that growth to happen where the facilities already are, because now you're not paying for new facilities to be built out to serve that growth. The second one is going to be maintaining your facilities. So it's really important to maintain those facilities and keep them at an established level of service, which is really all about providing the facilities at an adequate level of service. Another one would be ensuring that those facilities are provided at the time of development. So we're not trying to backtrack and provide these facilities and services thereafter the development has occurred. So it can get a little confusing on capital facilities and how it's a kind of a trickle down effect. So it begins with that comprehensive plan. That's where we're going to set up those general goals and objectives for how we want those capital facilities to serve the public. And that's really going to set up that framework of our intended growth. So as we say, this is where we want this growth to occur. We need to evaluate the ability for us to provide these facilities to the public of where that growth is going to occur. So it could be roads, schools, fire districts. So that feeds into this capital facilities plan, also known as a CFP. And that's really an implementation tool of the comprehensive plan. So it really highlights all the projects and kind of explains the analysis that was done to provide those public facilities adequately. It looks at levels of service. So we establish minimum levels of service standards for every facility to be provided to the public. So it could be gallons per minute, educational square footage per 1,000 residents. And it influences those capital facility investments as well. So we're going to look at, what projects are going to be required in order to meet that demand and growth. Are we going to need to improve our sewer? Are we going to need to build a new school? The GMA establishes specific requirements that need to be implemented within that CFP. So one of those being the inventory, so that's going to provide the location and capacity. Forecasted future needs, so that's that analysis that we'll do where we'll look at the growth, based on maximum build out, what public facilities are going to be needed in order to serve that community. proposed location of capacity and our expanded facility. So as we do these improvements, what is that going to give us in terms of growth and future capacity for that area? And then a 6-year finance plan, one of the most important things, how are you going to pay for it? You can't do it unless you're going to identify a method of paying for it. And then a reassessment if probable funding falls short. So maybe you outline your 6 and 20-year finance plan, but maybe your grant fell through, or there's different financing issues that happen throughout the process. It would trigger the reassessment clause, which would mean we need to go back and look at either the land use. So maybe that's taking it from a high density residential maybe to a medium density residential, if that's what could serve the area. It might be looking at different funding sources, or it could be lowering the level of service, but it's kind of one of the last options. So if all planning is implemented correctly, you'll have Department of Facility plans should have a reference to this comprehensive plan. So as these departments make their plans for how they're going to maybe serve solid waste or stormwater management, they're going to look at this comprehensive plan and say, okay, this is where the growth is going to occur, and this is where we need to provide these expansions or these improvements in the infrastructure. The capital improvement program, also known as a CIP, this is what is going to be invested in for the infrastructure. So this is where our decision makers say, here are the projects that are being financed or funded. And those projects are going to, meet those growth needs, and those are established on a yearly basis. So they should really reflect not only the department plan, but it should reflect the CFP. And then if all put together, they reflect the comprehensive plan, which is where we intend it to grow. And then another implementation tool that is development requirements. So it could be a developer providing the sewer infrastructure or building the roads out within a certain development. So you'll see that that's pretty common to occur. And the end result of that is these facilities and services being provided at that adequate level of service, but also just maintaining what we currently have. So you really got to look at what we can maintain based on this growth, what needs to be expanded, what needs to be improved upon, and then also what new projects need to come along in order to serve that growth. Another one of my topics are parks and recreation. So the main goal for parks and recreation is, maintaining the current inventory you have, but also expanding it. So, increasing those opportunities for wildlife and habitat, natural resource lands and water, and then ensuring that it relates to that capital facilities plan. So we're going to look at, the level of service of parks. It has its own level of service. So we do a whole analysis on the parks element of how can this be provided based on that growth. Some of the GMA requirements is that implementation and consistency with the capital facilities plan, as I mentioned, a 10-year parks and recreation demand estimate based on those densities. The evaluation of facilities and service needs. So they're going to do a full evaluation of, based on these facilities, what are going to be some of those needed improvements. Evaluation of tree canopy coverage within the GM or within the urban growth areas. And then we're going to identify intergovernmental coordination opportunities. So we're going to look at maybe it's partnering with a nearby jurisdiction to build a park that's going to serve a broader community. When we have these jurisdictional lines, they don't exist physically, so you can have somebody come from another city or town and be able to attend that park. So we really need to look at opportunities to partner with other jurisdictions to build out these parks to serve that community. So very similar to the transportation element, it's kind of implemented in the same manner. So the comprehensive plan is going to look at those general goals and objectives of what we want for parks. So we're going to take the community's vision and take what they value in a park system and place that into that comprehensive plan. And that's going to feed into that capital facilities plan, which looks at an analysis of, okay, what do we need to get done in order to meet that vision that the community had in those goals and objectives, and then also maintain that level of service. The Parks and Recreation Plan, the Parks Department actually creates their own parks plan, which really defines those parks even more of what the inventory and the needs. So within that, it's going to have that demands and needs analysis. It's going to define goals and objectives. Those goals and objectives are going to feed upon those comprehensive plan goals and objectives. So they'll kind of define those more in really lead that department in what they need to accomplish in order to accomplish that bigger vision that we had in that comprehensive plan. And then it's gonna identify park projects needed in order to meet that demand need analysis and maintain that level of service. It'll also have that detailed park inventory. So within the CFP, we'll have a general park inventory where we identify the parks. But the Parks Department will actually identify even more things such as how many baseball fields are there, how many bathrooms are there, how many swimming pools are available. And then and one of the most important things about capital facilities is identifying funding sources. So they'll also identify those funding sources again within their own plan. And it should match everything that's within the CFP because it kind of just repeats. So if all implemented correctly, going back to that CIP, which is the capital improvement program, which is where your decision makers say, okay, this is the project we want to be funded and built out. As long as it's approved, then that park will be built out and consider that community. And I'll pass it along to Graham, who is in charge of economic development.
Hello, everybody. Like Michael said, my name is Graham Zickafoos, and I'm the lead planner on the economic development element. Just to start us off a little bit about what exactly will be included in the economic development element. Goals and policies that ensure Spokane County residents have access to good jobs and economic opportunities. As well as goals that ensure that there's a sufficient tax base for public infrastructure projects such as fire stations, schools, parks, etc. Which kind of connects to Michael's capital facilities element and even to Parks and Rec a little bit. One thing, if you haven't picked up on it already, that is true for the comprehensive plan is that a lot of the goals and policies between elements tend to overlap and tend to work kind of in harmony with one another. And so you'll see that in economic development as well as a little bit later when I speak a little bit on climate change and resiliency. But anyway, going back to economic development, this is just reiterating the economic development goal as it's written in the Growth Management Act. The economic development element is meant to fulfill this goal. And then just real quick, the final product of the economic development elements includes goals and policies that focus on regional challenges, business startup, expansion, recruitment, tourism, education and training. Essentially what we'll be doing is we'll be taking the existing element and we will be working with business leaders and members of the public to create a new, to update existing goals, create new goals and policies that better reflect the current economic realities of Spokane County. Now, this is the last one of the individual elements we'll be presenting on in this presentation. It's also the newest or the most newly required element for the comprehensive plan, and that is the climate change and resiliency element. So this element is required because of House Bill 1181, which was passed and implemented last summer, 2023. And it basically consists of two sub-elements, greenhouse gas emission reduction and climate resiliency. And I'll speak to the specifics of those here in a few minutes. First, again, this is just the text that it shows the climate change and resiliency goal as it's written in the Growth Management Act. Climate change and resiliency element works to fulfill this goal. And then just a brief word on why a climate change and resiliency element is important. Climate hazards occur everywhere. We saw that last summer when we had wildfires here in the county, the Elk and the Gray fires. And they cause a lot of damage, and they can hurt planning efforts in communities through property damages and loss. And they can also lead to increased health risk for Spokane County residents and even to loss of life. Now, just returning real quick to the sub elements and some of the specifics of those. The first one is the greenhouse gas emission reduction sub element. Josh spoke briefly on some of the requirements included in this when he talked about transportation. But I can kind of reiterate them again. Essentially, this sub element, in this sub element, there must be goals and policies that lead to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled in Spokane County. These goals and policies must prioritize reductions that benefit overburdened communities. These include those most impacted by air pollution, low-income communities, and other groups of that nature. The climate change or the climate resiliency element deals more with adapting to and mitigating climate hazards. It's similar to a hazard mitigation plan, if any of you are familiar with what that is, but that's essentially a plan that does exactly what it sounds like it does. It's a plan for mitigating those different climate hazards that occur within Spokane County. And resiliency efforts similar to the greenhouse gas reduction emission reduction sub-element must also prioritize those overburdened communities. And then just at the bottom of the slide there, you can see just a list of some of the different climate hazards that can be common in Spokane County. Wildfires, heat waves, cold fronts, reduced snowpack are all climate hazards that we can be at risk for. And then finally, just to wrap up, this is just a final product. This is what the final product of this effort will be to create this sub-element. It will be a new climate change and resiliency chapter in the 2026 Spokane County Comprehensive Plan. And that will include a 20-year vision for how Spokane County will adapt to and mitigate climate hazards and improve air quality. And to wrap things up, I'll turn it back to Michael and we'll just kind of bring us through a timeline and a few other slides.
So where are we at in this process? So right now we're looking at our public participation program, which we've adopted, or it's just about to be adopted actually, which really outlined how we were going to implement public participation just for this comprehensive plan. So the county has a general public participation program policy, but we really want to be even more thorough within this plan. So we created a separate public participation program just to implement this comprehensive plan. Initiate collaboration engagement, that's kind of where we're at now. So these kickoff forums really were intended to provide the public with an educational opportunity because, you know, you can't participate in something unless you kind of have an idea of what you're participating in. So as we've kind of gone around to the different communities, we're hoping to kind of engage them by, you know, teaching them about what a comprehensive plan is, and then you can go forward with the rest of the process. So reviewing of existing plans and regulations, that's where we'll do our analysis of our existing code, existing regulations. We'll look at, you know, how well was the previous comprehensive plan implemented through the years. Data gathering and analysis, that's where we'll look at, you know, capital facilities, looking at all the other elements and doing their data gathering and that analysis. Staff reports and maps and drafts. So this is where we'll start drafting these documents. And through the entire process, you know, there's public engagement, and you'll have opportunity to see these drafts because they'll be posted on the web, and you'll have an opportunity to comment on those as well. And then public hearings, that gets down to the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. So we'll have hearings where you can attend those as well. The main goal is, you know, if you have enough public participation throughout the whole process and everybody's voice is heard, hopefully by the time you get to your public hearing, you know, the dust is kind of settled. And your plan goes through. And then DOC review, which is Department of Commerce review. So that's a 60-day process. Department of Commerce, which is a state agency, will review our plan and give us the okay if it meets compliance or not. And then that leads us to plan adoption in 2026. So a couple more information on, how you can get involved and where you can find some more information on the plan. Our website is a great source. That's really going to be the central hub for where we're going to be posting all of our documents, plans, kind of newsletters, where we're at in the process. It's also where you can sign up for our advisory teams, as well as be a stakeholder, or even as just, general public, you want to stay up to the know. We have opportunities there to sign up for that. And if you scan the QR code, you can sign up to get notified. There'll be a submit a comment box as well, so you can comment on the comprehensive plan. And to touch a little bit more on stakeholders, as well as our technical advisory committees. The stakeholders are, we kind of intended them to be for, the general group of experts who, want to be more involved in the process. So maybe you want to, submit more documentation of your feedback on certain things, as well as, be a part of a larger group for a specific element. You can sign up to be a stakeholder, and that will kind of get you more involved in that specific element and in our planning process. And then the technical advisory committees will be made, there'll be certain technical advisory committees that will kind of encompass certain elements. And those are really meant to have the, topic experts on those. And that's kind of how we're going to filter some of the community involvement to kind of start narrowing that scope of the goals and objectives. So it's kind of a trickle down effect through the general public, stakeholder involvement, and then those core experts in those topics. And that's kind of our presentation for today. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, we'll stand for questions.
I have a question. You're talking about, it sounds like this GMA is a new thing that's come out. When was GMA incorporated for Spokane County?
So GMA's been around for a while. It goes back to 1991. Oh, sorry, 1990. So it's been around for a while, and it's kind of constantly being revised and
Enlarged.
Enlarged.
So we have some property that was zoned urban reserve in 1990. Can you tell me what urban reserve is?
I can take this one. So yes, urban reserve land is land that's sits usually just outside of an urban growth area. So an urban growth area is includes the incorporated cities, but it also includes areas on the that border those cities that can be zoned at higher densities. Urban reserve land sits just outside of the urban growth area, and it is there sort of earmarked in case of urban growth area expansion, so that it can, if the urban growth area expands to include that land, then it can be zoned for higher densities than it currently is.
So it can't be developed right now, correct?
Correct, it cannot be.
So you guys should maybe incorporate a plan where the landowners don't have to pay taxes on that property through this time, because we can't do anything with it. What do you think about that?
What are the taxes?
Maybe pay us back taxes.
We'll get back to the county commissioners on that.
Yeah, that's we'll talk.
We're just planning.
They're the ones that set this up in 1990. They controlled all of it.
No, it's
So-
And
state.
now it's a
State.
big mushroom that the government's taken over, isn't it?
So
Turn into that?
GMA is a state mandated, and it was really implemented to, focus on planning for that future growth. Those, the areas that you're talking about kind of came before our time, so it's the predecessors and where they thought the growth was gonna occur, and that's kind of where that urban reserve lies now within the county.
So what can I do to get this property changed out of urban reserve?
Into something that can be zoned higher density.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It parallels the Northwoods development. Right there between Northwoods and Argonne Road.
Hmm.
You can't do anything with it. You drive up north on On Argonne, and you see all these woods up there.
Yeah,
That's the
so,
property. Makes sense, doesn't it?
yeah, well, right now, people who have land zoned urban reserve that are expressing interest with being included in the urban growth area in case it expands. You can submit a letter of interest to our office. I can talk to you a little bit more about that afterwards.
Yeah, thank you.
No
We've been
problem.
working with attorneys and such since 1990. It's very effective.
Yes,
When was the last time the urban growth area was expanded in Spokane County?
that is a good question.
It was established in the
No, when was it last expanded?
the last periodic update is when they expanded, so that would have been, the 2017 plan. 16 plan, and we actually got sued for it. So, it was actually at the time, our predecessors, it expanded technically too much. And so, that's what happened. So now with this plan to make sure we're back in the GMA compliance, that's one of the biggest parts of our work is doing that land capacity and our populations to make sure our urban growth area is adequately sized.
How often do they do that?
Every periodic update. So with our 10 years, that's when we're adjusting and looking at it again. And so after this one, it'll be the next 10-year update.
Oh, go ahead. I'm a little confused as far as how the county versus the incorporated cities within the county function. I mean, you come up with ideas for the entire county. What about Spokane Valley as a city? They make their own decisions. I come from Rockford. We're an incorporated city. We have a city council and so on. We have to do a comprehensive plan also for our incorporated city. So what do you do to coordinate all these different ones from Spokane Valley, from me, and the city of Spokane? How do you coordinate all those into a county plan? Or are you just dealing with the areas that are unincorporated?
Yeah, we can, take that one.
So in terms of county jurisdiction, like what does our zoning account for? That will be those unincorporated areas and all the rural areas. So when someone in those areas applies for a permit, where the planner is handling that, our current planning team is. For each individual jurisdiction, those cities, they have their own plans, you're right. And if you live there, those are gonna be the main plans that affect you and your community. The way that it ties into us as the county is one, our countywide planning policies, which aren't in the comp plan. They're a community framework or a regional framework that us as the county planners and also every jurisdiction work to create. And so that is an overall policy framework created at the county level that every jurisdiction's comp plan needs to follow those policies. They're also, every jurisdiction's plan can't conflict with our county comp plan. So there's intrinsic connection between every jurisdiction's plan and our plan, specifically because, you know, we can't have massive contradictions in our land uses and our growth patterns in these unincorporated areas that are right next to the cities, and you get really weird growth patterns and all that. So there's always interjurisdictional coordination between elected officials. We have something called the Planning Technical Advisory Committee, which is an advisory committee of all us planners that we talk with elected officials on. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It's also, we also have what we call joint planning areas. So those are just outside of your jurisdiction's UGA. And that's where the county and that jurisdiction are partnering to plan for that area. And that's likely where if your jurisdiction was to expand, they'd be expanding out into those joint planning areas. And a lot of the stuff we went over today with the Growth Management Act, the jurisdictions follow the same rules, so that everything that we kind of went over kind of applies within your own jurisdiction.
What's the difference between agricultural zoning or areas and rural areas?
Yeah, so there are agricultural uses that can be done in rural zones. Agriculture are like specifically designated zoned lands that are much like larger scale. There's small tract and large tract. So I believe it's mostly to do with just the scale of operation. With
Okay, what would
agricultural.
that scale be? I live in Valley Ford, which is
Oh,
agricultural.
What's the? Oh, okay. Josh, based off soil classification is another addition. I don't
What does that
remember.
mean? What is soil classification?
It's a Department of Agricultural, has soil classifications for like how suitable the land is for farming. I'm not, couldn't get more
After hundred
specific.
and 30 years, it's probably suitable,
It's probably what?
suitable Valley Ford, or they've only been farming it for 130 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't, I'm not a farmer. I wouldn't know. That's why we're gonna work with them.
Small tract ag is 10-acre minimum.
That is true, yes. And I think large tract is,
40-acre.
that is correct, yeah. And then I believe on rural lands, there are some allowances for uses of agricultural fruit growing as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, that.
Yeah.
Real quick, I think, did you have a?
Actually, yes, that's my.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, another one.
What do you consider affordable housing?
That's a great question. So, affordable housing, so the HUD standard is if you spend 30% or more of your income on housing costs, that being either your mortgage and all the housing utilities associated with it, or, rent and your housing costs, then you're considered cost burdened. So really that 30% of your income is what is technically the max amount you can spend, for it to be affordable. So when we're talking about affordable housing for economic segments, that's the way they classify it as, they essentially assign housing types to income brackets. But it's not simply a easy one-to-one of like apartments are, you know, to serve, you know, 0 to 50% of the market. There's a lot of, each community sort of establishes housing types that fit those income brackets. So basically, when we're talking about affordability, we're talking about people not spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And making sure we have different housing types and, looking at the market within those to see, do we have housing that's affordable to various income segments in the community? Yeah.
You were mentioning which of you were leading, which elements will be having consultants being supporting them.
Yeah, so we have technical advisory committees for housing. What's that?
There'll be a general planning consultant. We'll do one specifically for climate. We're also looking at one just for PR purposes. So they would kind of implement these kind of conversations as well. Believe, yeah, climate's the biggest one. It actually has its own separate grant just to hire a consultant, but for that.
And we're still exploring, where exactly a consultant would fit into the creation of the climate element.
As far as the other elements go, that general consultant that we choose for this whole comprehensive plan, hopefully you can find a consultant that kind of an expert in many fields, so they'd be able to serve kind of wherever we need them to. Yes.
How do you guys determine, so you got maps, things back here, could you talk a little bit about what those represent? And then could you also talk to us about how you determine when you're gonna expand a UGA, what land gets expanded into?
Yeah, do you want to touch on that?
Yes, I gotta take a look. I can see what a few of them are from here. So this one here, furthest one on my right is that looks like the comprehensive plan map. So that just shows the zoning for the unincorporated areas of Spokane County. And you can see it's got a legend there at the top if you want to take a closer look and see exactly where or what all the different colors on that map mean. They're designating different zones. The map right next to it going left is urban growth area and joint planning area and urban reserve land. The third one over from the right is natural resources land. And then this is the only one I can't tell what it is from here. Okay, that's the wetland.
So that's like one of the critical areas. There's multiple.
Yeah, there's-
critical areas.
So to touch a little bit more on this, so those are really what guide our day-to-day operations. That's what we refer to if you go to our county webpage, there's a tool called Mavis, and those maps, you'll be able to click different layers on that website and kind of interact with that map. And maybe you want to see wetland designations, you can click that, see where those are located. There's an important detail about the comprehensive plan map over there. So we have a land use map and a comprehensive map. The comprehensive map is kind of what we're in, what we aspire, what we intend it to be. The land use map is actually what you're currently designated and what is kind of written in code and what would apply to you if you're doing certain, if you're applying for like to build an ADU or anything like that. It would be based on that land use designation.
Right, and then to touch on your question about UGA expansion, so whether or not the UGA expands is based on the outcome of the land capacity analysis. So land capacity analysis essentially takes a look at the population that we are projected to receive over a certain period of time, and then takes a look at the available land in the county and then looks at whether or not the population we're projected to receive can fit into the available land we have within the urban growth area without changing any zoning. And so your UGA expansion occurs when essentially we don't have enough land in the UGA as it is currently zoned. And then because then we would have to expand to include the population that we would have to expand to include the population we're projected to receive over that time.
But prior to any expansion though, you're gonna look at infill and the capital facilities to serve that. So through this whole process, priority is infill. This is all, that's part of reducing that sprawl. So we're gonna look at upzoning first, and then we'll look at, and then also the availability of the facilities to serve those higher density areas that we're designating. And we'll also, in this whole process, as we get this, county-wide allocation, the jurisdictions kind of get together and they're each allocated a certain percentage of this, what we call the Office of Financial Management. That's where we're getting these population numbers. That's where they come from. So we adopted the medium allocation, which is the Office of Financial Management's kind of middle of what they estimate the population to be. So that 100,000 growth right around there. And then based on that, we have a methodology that is part of that countywide planning policies that we look at all the jurisdictions, say, okay, you're getting this many, you're getting this many, you're getting this many. And right now we're at phase 1 of that. So the jurisdictions are doing all their land capacity analysis to say, okay, how much land based on my current zoning do I have to take on that growth? And then that second phase is where we'll look at the housing as well as the capital facilities and that availability to serve that incoming growth. You may find that if you did your maximum build out and you provided evidence that you could provide the public facilities to expand that UGA, that would then probably be where you get that expansion.
The urban reserve, that land zoned urban reserve is specifically earmarked for where the urban growth area would expand if it were to expand. So that's kind of the
Expand or move. We can
Yeah.
also move UGA area around without technically increasing the square footage as well.
It's considering for expansion.
What calculations do you guys do to offset the zoned land that is available on your paper versus the land that's not available because someone doesn't want to develop it?
So we actually have we have a built-in market factor, which is essentially where we measure all of the land within with the land capacity analysis. And then we essentially make an assumption, and it's kind of an industry assumption that about 30% of that land will not be developed. And so the final figure that you see for the LCA is basically all the land minus 30%. And so that's kind of how we account for,
And do you guys remove things like parks, cemeteries?
Yes.
and All the things. that are zoned
yeah,
R1?
critical areas, things like that. Yeah.
So it's steep slopes, things that really wouldn't be developed would be removed, some underneath power lines or things like that.
Mhm. Sorry, I see a few,
I think the lady
Yeah, I
was
think you were first. Yes.
Well, I know nothing about this, okay, but I think there's a couple interesting cases that it might be interesting to hear how the decisions get made around these cases. One is the development in Glen Rose, that people have all these big signs that say, save rural Glen Rose. And yet there's a lot of development going on there. The other one is Lata Creek, I think it is, that said, we're not developing here because we don't have the infrastructure. Who's making those decisions? Are they made under these plans, or how's those two things, examples of that come down?
Latah Creek, I a little bit, I think some of that is still within city boundaries, so that's more of a city of Spokane.
I don't think so.
Oh, is it? There's parts of it there, I think. I went to one of their neighborhood meetings a while back, and it was. But
Well,
really,
if you're really close to the city,
Hmm.
off of, what is that road that's being, but, you know, after 2 or 3 miles from the one I-90,
hmm,
it's not city.
hmm. Okay.
So if it wasn't, so if the city felt like it was in their jurisdiction, they could do it according to their comprehensive plan. If it's outside of the city, it's within the county's jurisdiction. that how that
Essentially,
works?
yes, that's how it
Yeah.
worked. Like Michael said, there is joint planning areas where it is
Mhm.
sort of both. Within the unincorporated, there's different service providers for each one, so that plays an impact, because sometimes the city directly provides services to an unincorporated area near it, and so that impacts decisions as well. So it is sort of a coordinated effort between the two.
And there's no one trumps the other kind of thing.
No, not, I mean, yeah, no, like
Not really, because
obviously.
we all follow under GMA, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
GMA is what.
How about the Glen Rose example?
It's a little difficult to speak to specific developments. So our department, we're long-range planning. And so we're not necessarily dealing with specific developments in the day-to-day. That's more the current planning side of things. And so it's a little bit difficult to speak to exactly, you know, the daily ins and outs of that kind of a development from our perspective, but
Josh Curran is the one to talk.
yeah, we might, so
Just curious, you know,
the current planning department may have a little bit more to say about that.
So you guys, so I'm Commissioner Cuny, so,
Okay.
so some of those answers, questions I can answer. So in Latah Valley, it's actually the Department of Transportation who is blocking, further development because there's not enough capacity there, which is part of when they were talking about transportation, the Spokane Regional Transportation Council is part of that and is looking at what the transportation needs are across the entire county. And so that's one of the reasons Latah Creek, the valley there is having difficulty. And we're, you know, the city of Spokane is one part of it, that there's some development that they'd like to do, but they've got to get that infrastructure set up in order to develop it. I've been in conversations, you know, because there's some development on the county side versus the city side. And we are trying to coordinate and deal with that. And then with Glen Rose, I became commissioner at the end of 2017. That was already zoned for the sportsplex there. That there's been the issues that are in legal proceedings. So I can't really speak too much to it, but those were decisions that were made prior. And then we're kind of set up on a 10-year cycle. And so this is our 10-year cycle to update the plan by the end of 2026. And so I would say, as you're looking at, as you know, we as commissioners are looking at what expansion is, we're looking at what are the areas that people want to, that are in those urban growth areas or reserve areas. So we can bring them in that are already kind of pre-planned, that were set up, you know, 10 years ago. So this is just kind of the first phase of letting you know kind of what's coming. And we appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Because they will be helping guide us as the commissioners as we move forward with this. And we do definitely want to have public comment all along the way. So as they said, you can reach out to them, you know, you can reach out to your commissioners, but they really have to set up the cycle for us to let us know what are the areas that we can expand into? What is, right now, looking at what the land capacity is, what our population numbers are. I think we're just approving those as commissioners here soon. As to what we're gonna be looking at as that future population growth. And so it is a process, as you saw, with a long timeline that we want to make happen, and we want to make sure that everybody's aware and can participate in the process. And so, and I do see that we have Representative Leonard Christian here in the audience as well. So a lot of what we're doing with growth management is required by the state. It is not the county that is wanting to do all of these things. It is requirements from the state that are coming down to us as county commissioners. So I just want to make that point as well.
And to kind of touch on like that, supporting that growth so that we don't run into scenarios where the infrastructure is lacking. That kind of goes back to this importance of planning for capital facilities and, looking at based on that future growth, what's going to need to be provided. It's not always perfect. It's kind of hard to estimate. Maybe, a portion of the population might want to move to a location other than the other one that you planned for. So that's really the importance of planning for these capital facilities on this 20-year horizon. So that's what we hope to do kind of through this process.
I kind of have a two-part question about the determinants on expanding the urban growth boundary. I'd like to ask a question. So that determination is largely on a county-wide, so all the cities and things inside that their developable land capacity determines the overall areas growth management, boundary expansion possibility, correct?
Yeah, so-
what happens in the city, but the city can't really expand much outside of incorporating our places that are largely already inside the growth boundary. So when we're talking about expanding the growth boundary, we're talking about a 30% probability of not developing, let's say, a surface parking lot down in Portland owned by Diamond Parking that we know has got about a 0% chance of building. So that kind of creates an additional artificial constraint. Are different property, I mean, are there, is it just, sorry, I'm losing my thought. Is it all just across the board? This is the zoning potential of a piece of dirt that isn't developed yet. And we say that 70% of this is going to get developed, and whatever we need from that point expands the boundary. Or are you getting a little more granular with the reality that Diamond Parking has never been developed or sell their downtown Spokane parking lot service?
So it's important to kind of look at, each jurisdiction's kind of its own UGA in that itself. And that's where we talk about, that's where annexing kind of comes into play. So if we see maximum capacity where they say, okay, we can't take on this growth anymore, that's where we start looking at, okay, we look at these joint planning areas and maybe they're annexing and expanding your jurisdiction's boundary of where they are. To touch on a little bit on how we're formulating it, we do hand adjustments. So it's a pretty complicated formula of how we're looking at this land capacity analysis. We use a program called GIS, which is a mapping program. And then we also use a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, and that's how we kind of come out with this formula. And the methodology is actually established on the countywide. So we're all using the same formula. And then at the end of it, we'll go in and we look at those individual areas and we kind of do that it's kind of a hand manipulation because they're visual things that we got to see, some local expertise as well. And that's where we start to take out some of those. But a parking lot, could potentially be developed, so it might have some potential. But that's where that 30% as a whole is really important because we can kind of account for parking lots or those other areas. And with if you put in a letter for a UGA, that kind of helps us too, because now we can see if you have an interest of becoming into the UGA, you're more likely to develop, and that's what we want. We don't want to designate UGAs where they're not actually going to occur. So using some of those suggested letters, we can kind of analyze it better for those areas that are more likely to develop.
I'm gonna do him a one better and ask a three-part question. But I think they're relatively simple. So first of all, thanks for your presentation. That was well organized, and so any confusion I have is probably my own. With regard to the comprehensive plan elements, I also recall, I think you had some additional chapters. Am I remembering that correctly? So elements like the natural environment and parks and rec, are those parts of the additional chapters rather than the comprehensive plan elements?
Those are, like natural environment parks, those are their own chapters in the comp plan.
Yeah,
Parks and Recreation, for example, the Parks Department also has their own plan that like implements it
sure.
further.
I'm familiar with that.
Everything we presented are actual chapters in the comprehensive plan itself.
Okay, so that then brings me to the second question, which is really perhaps more of a comment. This seems like such a complex and iterative process. It would be interesting if you have it available to know how everything sequences and flows and how sort of, let's say, information in the natural environment chapter is then informing decisions made in the land use portion, for example, or how constraints in capital facilities naturally limit potential changes in land use designation. That I would just be curious to see how you all are planning and sequencing around. And then the third part is, as I go to the website for public participation, I think I'm already signed up to receive notifications. That's why I'm here tonight. But I'm curious how we sign up further to either be a stakeholder or participate as a technical advisor to the chapters or elements.
On that QR or on our little business cards over there, we have the QR codes that'll take you to the website. There's also our comprehensive plan email that we established just for this. So you can reach out to us on there and just say you want to be a stakeholder.
Okay.
And we'll add you to the list. And
Great.
then our technical advisory committees, we're going to be posting those to the web hopefully within the next couple month or so. And that'll kind of detail what all is involved as being part of that technical advisory committee, because it is a bigger commitment. So we want to make sure that those who want to be part of that, you know, understand the commitment that they're making to be involved and participate in that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact.
Anything on the second element in terms of the sequencing and how everything informs?
I think you
itself?
just described a good comprehensive plan. That's ideally showing how everything is coordinated amongst each other and how none of these really exists in a vacuum is very important. So it is our intent to write a plan in the way you described.
In the back, yeah.
So, let's look at clarifying questions. You said the Office of Financial Management is the one that sets the numbers that you're going off of, correct?
They're the ones who set the population
So,
allocation.
yeah, the population.
The projection,
growth,
yes.
The projection,
Yes, correct.
correct. And so I was intrigued, you said something about choosing the medium number. Did they actually give you like, what's the range for what was kind of highest and lowest?
I don't know.
It's a rough ballpark. I mean, I'm not looking for, I mean, are we talking tens of thousands or?
So, right, there's probably between low and high, probably tens of thousands.
Yeah,
Okay.
but the most important thing to note is that medium is very accurate. They get it pretty spot on. And that's why we adopt that medium, because that's gonna be the most accurate data for us to use. And it's also the most justifiable for us to use, because you've got to justify why you're gonna choose that.
Which brings me, I guess, to my next question. You talked justifiable. So, I mean, back leading up to what was 2016, the last change to the plan, you talked about the lawsuit previously. And I guess part of why I'm getting to this is we have property that we were like we went to forum meetings, we were in front of the commissioners like in 2013, 2014, and we celebrated, we're like, yay, everything's changing for us. And then all of a sudden the lawsuit comes and everything changes, and what we were initially communicated with ended up just going away because, and so I think somebody said something about like the projections then, like 10 years ago, perhaps were too high. Is that part of why that lawsuit came?
So it was, prior to our time, so we don't know a whole lot about, what the implications of why, the county was sued for that.
It's a very complicated case.
It would kind of be part of that though, of the providing the evidence of and doing the research to say, okay, this is why the UGA is here, or even capital facilities, for example. So I'm gonna give you a scenario not related to Spokane County, but if you were to say you're gonna grow in a certain area, but you didn't provide, how you were gonna pay for those capital facilities or provide any evidence of the infrastructure being there or having the ability to serve that.
Sure, yeah.
And then you designated that as a UGA and say you're gonna grow there. well, then you didn't really necessarily follow the Growth Management Act, because the Growth Management Act wants you to provide the evidence of, you know, how are you gonna finance the infrastructure to go there, or where are your development regulations to provide some type of evidence of that infrastructure to be there? Is that kind of?
Yeah, so I guess here's my final question then.
Yeah.
So what hope do we have that things are gonna be different in 2026? Because ultimately, I'm looking at it just going, is this for real? Because we have been, for like 2 decades of my life, I have dedicated energy to, I would love to purge GMA as an acronym from my vernacular. Like I'm done, I'm tired, I'm ready to just give up and roll over. And so I'm looking at it just going, is it really worth a fight? Is the juice worth the squeeze in this scenario? Or because I think it was FutureWise that was the organization that brought the lawsuit against Spokane County, and that organization is not gone. And so I'm looking at this just going, is that the reality? Is that the reality that we're gonna go through this, all this process and ultimately it'd be for nothing?
And I mean, you know, corporations like FutureWise, you know, it's good for us because it comes down all the checks and balances, right? So, you know, we appreciate the feedback that FutureWise gives us because they help us, you know, make these corrections. We could do our best in our analysis, and then that ultimate say will be, you know, when the Department of Commerce looks at this, our proposal or our new plan, at the end of the day, is it all worth it? Definitely worth it. You know, not only is it state mandated, but there's other implications to not having, you know, being in compliance. You know, funding, there's a wide range, variety of, you know, issues by not being within that Growth Management Act. It's also just good planning, right? To have these things so that we can, you know, provide the facilities adequately. You know, we can grow where we want to grow. We can envision what the community wants. And that's kind of, say, don't give up hope.
So am I hearing you say there is great confidence amongst your team that your plan is going to succeed?
So that's what I wanted to get to. I wish I could give you a definite answer right now, but the fact of the matter is we're still working on the land capacity analysis. We're still assessing the urban growth area, the unincorporated urban growth areas capacity to hold the population that we are allocated over the next 20 years. Unfortunately, we can't give a definite answer at this time just because we're still working on it. And I don't want to give you an answer and have that be the wrong answer later on, which is why I'm not, I just don't want to give you an answer that turns out to be wrong in the future. Yes, sir.
Yeah, two items. I also was involved with that 2016 GMA. And just to shed my personal experience on that approach was, it appeared that Growth Management Act, when it was enacted, was more like a spaghetti thrown against the wall or a shotgun approach where they just said, we're gonna grow some areas. And then someone said, well, if you're gonna grow that area, where's your sewer? Or where's your water? Or how are you gonna get roads done? And so things need to be trimmed and some wings got clipped. So that was fun. But my question is, on the land use analysis, what's the time frame for everyone to find out how much land they've got or what to do?
So right now, I think we are hoping to have at least the unincorporated Spokane County. We're hoping to have some figures ready sometime in September. And that's about as specific as I can get at this point, but that's roughly what we're looking at for sort of our deadline to have that, you know, our T's crossed and our I's dotted on that.
Cool.
It's gonna differ a bit between jurisdictions too, because, you know, smaller towns and everything have a lot less staff. And so we have to be a little flexible working with all the jurisdictions as we coordinate everything too for timelines.
The funding too is from GMA is set to be released in July. So a lot of, you know, the jurisdictions that you guys might be within, they might not be as far ahead as we are in this process. It's because they're waiting on that funding so that they can either, you know, hire a consultant or, you know, some of these planning departments might be a little smaller. the process has started for all of us though, as we've all teamed up and we meet on a weekly basis with steering committee of elected officials, then there's specific planning, we call them PTAC, and those are kind of the experts in how we do this whole process.
So if I understand, there's actually, Spokane County is actually a dual role. You have your own unincorporated land that you need to do an analysis with, and you then need to work with all the other jurisdictions.
Correct.
Yes.
So when you say September, is that just for your own land, or is that the time, you know, because Airway Heights might say, hey, we've got tons of land, we'll take anything we can get. But then City of Spokane might say, we don't want nothing. So how?
So, yeah, so there, like Michael said, there are some jurisdictions that are waiting on some funding to get the ball rolling on some of their land capacity analysis stuff. And so it's difficult to say with any amount of certainty what their timelines are. So when I throw out September, that's tentatively what we are hoping to have something done by then, for the unincorporated areas. In the meantime, we will be working very closely with the City of Spokane Valley, Airway Heights, all these other jurisdictions through PTAC, which is Planning Technical Advisory Committee, as well as some other, other jurisdictions that are not a part of that group. So we will be working very closely with them as they work to do their land capacity analysis as well. Did I answer everything part of your question? Okay.
Last call questions. We had one person online, maybe. Did we?
Ask them if they want to.
Anybody online have any questions? You can raise your hand.
Well, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate, you know, this public involvement in the beginning of this process. Keep your eye out on that website. We'll have some future opportunities. We're hoping to start our visioning process where, you know, you're really going to get an opportunity to, you know, present some of the values you have for Spokane. So yeah, be on the lookout for those. We're hoping right around July-ish, end of July. We'll be holding similar public forums to this and hold more opportunities for you to engage on the website as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.